This video covers technology security, and the areas that are explained are shown in the bulleted text. And once again, as the others, we do hope you enjoy this video.
So one of the areas of this section is the physical measures. So how we have to look at it from a physical perspective of looking after our devices. So we've already covered from the software using the system's point of view, protecting our sensitive data. But obviously we have to be aware that we've got, in this day and age, particularly with portable devices, laptops, PDAs, and also, most importantly, mobile phones, anything that's physically possible to take away an electronic device should always be locked and secured with a cable. Laptops in particular, even though we have got the bags, etc., that you can hold on to, is making sure that it's all locked and it's all very, very safe. But there's another key thing that we have to be remembering, looking particularly for our test point of view, is you may get in this situation where there's multiple choice questions, and it might be asking you, for instance, what measures would you do to keep a portable device safe, for instance, if you're in a public area. So obviously making it sure it's locked with a secured anchored cable to the table is another particular one that a lot of people will use. You'll notice it sometimes. You'll get people that will pop away. They'll make sure the laptop is locked so no one can access it, unless obviously they shouldn't have their username and password, but making sure it's physically locked to a table that's sturdy as well. Another thing that you may find in your tests is they might ask you about removable storage devices, so USB memory sticks. There's always been a big thing that you should never, ever, ever keep sensitive data on a USB memory stick, because they're so easy to lose. But because they've got confidential, sensitive and valuable information. So it should, if it is going to be kept in a secure place so that you remember it's there, and it's going to be put back so that it is not. It's because they are vulnerable to loss and thefts. Particular when they first came out onto the market, everyone was like, "Oh, this is excellent, it's very easy to use, pick up, take away." But unfortunately, the easiness of losing them, because they are such small devices, is quite common. But also, it's not just from a malicious individual or a person's point of view of what they're going to physically steal. It's also the environment and the actual hazards as well we have to be aware. And this may come up in your test too, in terms of backing up information in the attempt that, for instance, there could be theft-proof, also waterproof and fireproof as well. So always ensure that you do keep a backup of all your information, because there's the threats not just from malicious intent, but obviously from the elements as well. Organizations particularly will carry out regular complete copies of all files, so they'll have systems in place where their servers will be kept doing backups to other servers. So in the case of there is a situation, it could be electronic fault, it could be obviously malicious intent, and obviously the elements of nature that have caused this. So there is the possibility of that happening, but also you have to be aware of the possibility of accidental file deletion and data corruption, which comes with that as well. So always ensure that you are backing up your files, and that may come up in your test as well. What would be the best way to protect your data in case of these elements, these actions happening? Is obviously regular backups as well. And some cases you may actually decide to do an off-site backup or an actual backup to a storage device that's next to you as well. Always handy, but keeping obviously protected and safe using correct procedures as well. One more little thing though is making sure that you do actually save your work while you're doing it frequently, long, short periods. I know that we are in a day and age where computer devices are more stable, more reliable, particularly with the advancement of solid state disks as opposed to our previous ID disks. But at the same time, it is good to make sure that you do regular short periods of saving to make sure that it is permanent, or actually do backups as well. So good to get into that nature. And some these sort of these behaviors may come up in your test, may asking you why you're doing this. So keeping it simple, you can't go wrong. May also ask you a question particularly about networks and wireless safety. Now we did slightly briefly touch on in terms of in public networks. So public network, for example, is you going to say your local McDonald's, your local coffee shop, or even an airport, or anywhere that is the public area that offers a public free network that anyone can connect to. But the actual thing you have to be very, very careful though in terms of the wireless safety is that what protection do they have in place, because it is an open network. for anybody to actually go onto, and they can share and they can do what needs be particularly, and it is a hotbed for particularly hackers who will go around and actually use that as their actual their domain physically to attack. So and pretty much the way to describe a public network is it's always described as highly likely to be unsecure. Even though you are logging in, you're creating, saying who you are to get access to it, it may and highly likely still not have a firewall in place, antivirus, or any protection that way as well. So the best case scenario, for example, if you were asked in a test a question, for example, how would you send information to an individual over an unsecured network, you would look to make sure if it was emailed that the actual email is encrypted, so the only person you send to can actually access it. So it's important that here. So be aware that you should not send unencrypted confidential information across unsecured network. Even though you are sending it encrypted, it is still a hazard there as well. So just be careful you get a question in that sort of nature. So it's just that point there. So very important to remember that. So types of connectivity you may find, and it'll ask you in your test. So we are aware that Bluetooth is a common practice of communication, particularly with other peripherals like headphones and media devices and automatic. In the syllabus, it's very important to remember, the range between Bluetooth devices is about 10 meters and up to 8 devices which can be connected at the same time. Now, even though I'm saying this now straight away, and by all means, the advancements of technology is always building, we're always looking at the syllabus of what you're doing here. So remember, at this time and point, if you see it in your test, it would be 10 meters of the actual range, and it is up to 8 devices that can be connected at the same time as well. So really important you keep in mind with that though. So I'm sure that some of you have probably been able to get more devices attached to Bluetooth connectivity, but for this syllabus it is 8 devices and 10 meters. Just another point as well, particularly with Wi-Fi, wireless network may be visible to access to others. So sometimes you may find trying to access a wireless network and it doesn't show, and lo and behold, you have to go through extra measures to place it because it's more secure through that way. Also, it needs to be secure to prevent other wireless network users accessing it, and needs to be encrypted to prevent data from being intercepted and read. So pretty much what we were touching on the previous slide just there. But what it actually is encryption. So this is another thing that may come up in your test to actually explain what it is. So encryption is essentially scrambling all the information that you are sending. So for instance, if it was a document or a attachment, it's into a form that can be easily understood by anyone, can't be easily understood by anyone not authorized to access it. So what it does is it will essentially encrypt all the information, and then it will send it to the individual. So during that process of being sent from one part of the internet to the other, a malicious individual may try to intercept it, but if it's encrypted, it's going to be encrypted into, for instance, this sort of cipher, C-cipher sort of language, and very, very difficult and complex. Even myself, even describing it, is actually quite a scrambling sort of way of discussing it. So what happens is it's going to be all in numbers and different characters, which is not going to make any sense and very difficult to unlock and decrypt, but only until it gets to the source that it's intended to, when it will actually decrypt and go through. So it's a much more secure way of sending. So just the point in the second one here, based on the principles of key locking, encrypting the data, and another key unlocking decrypts it from the actual end there. Other security settings to be aware of is to ensure that you don't use the default password for anything you wish to keep private or secure. So a lot of people I've spoke to in my past times have always said, oh, my router is always the password 1234, or it's just password with a capital P. What that is trying to explain is, and it's also not just this slide here, it's also explaining the point of generalization with passwords, is that these sort of things are quite common at the start with default machines. So if you're not deciding to change it, it's going to be quite easy for a hacker or a malicious individual to log in using that straight away. So it is good, but also making sure that you do, particularly with your web browsers, adjust your default security settings to protect you from privacy and also your own security as well. So you can do that, for instance, and this is an example through Internet Explorer. So selecting tools, and then you'd go into your security tab, and it will give you the option of your security levels just here. So your media, what cookies you can have, what sort of extensions are allowed, for example, and what can be prompted for you as well. So there's certain things there, and this is coming back to your questions as well, because when you do take your test, and particularly moving on to your practice test beforehand, which I'll explain in a second, they're all multiple choice in this this unit. So there's nothing in terms of explaining. So you'll have a question, and it's going to give you 4 options, and you select the one that is best describing to correctly answer the question. So that's that.